Hello and welcome to Jesse Bear Book Club. Today we are talking about His Favourite Wife, Trapped in Polygamy by Susan Ray Schmidt. I was interested in reading this book because it focuses on the Church of the Firstborn of the Fullness of Time, also known as the LeBaron group, who I know very little about, as most well-known books and documentaries about Mormon polygamy focus on the FLDS and Kingston group. I was also interested in this book because it is set a long time before most modern popular autobiographies about polygamy, and I was curious to see if rules and attitudes had changed over the years. Definitely looking at photographs, you can immediately tell the LeBaron group has a more laid-back approach to modesty. This review has been broken into two parts because it is so long. The second part will be coming out next week. There is a disclaimer at the start of this book where the author, Susan Ray Schmidt, tells us some of the events in this book have been condensed to make them read better, but we all know it is just to add to the drama of the story. Normally this sort of thing would bug me, but it didn't in this case because she was so honest about it. The book opens when Susan is 14, and the first few chapters focus on how she is overly preoccupied with who she is going to marry. She has no other aspiration in life other than marrying well. It is a very medieval mindset. Susan is also waiting for a sign from God as to whom she should marry. When Susan has a dream telling her she should marry her prophet's brother, LeBaron, who is nearly 20 years her senior, and she is cool with it, it made my skin crawl, as she is nothing but a child, a groomed child bride who knows nothing else. When LeBaron starts courting Susan, it is with her parents' permission, and I can't help thinking her parents, LeBaron, and his mother, grandmother LeBaron, who is Susan's piano teacher, all conspired to make this happen. Susan even wonders if this is a plot. I also think it is interesting that at this time, when LeBaron starts courting Susan, she is taken out of state school and starts to be homeschooled, like many other teenagers in polygamist communities. It's all too coincidental. There is also some one-to-one brainwashing going on. Susan is being preached at by LeBaron's younger brother Ervil, that she must obey God and marry the man that God has chosen for her, which is conveniently Ervil himself. What follows is pretty disgusting grooming behaviour on Ervil's part, and not just towards Susan. He also convinces her friend Debbie to marry him, who is also just a teenager. Luckily, Susan gets freaked out when Ervil announces his plans to celestially seal Susan to him secretly, and she backs out, but is terrified of repercussions from Ervil. She confesses everything about her relationship with Ervil to LeBaron when he returns from a trip from work, and he sorts the whole thing out by simply marrying Susan himself 2 days later. How convenient. It disgusts me two middle-aged men are fighting over a 15-year-old girl. Susan is only 15 years and 10 days old when she marries her 38-year-old husband, and it makes me feel sick. Her parents gave their permission, and they kept saying if it was anyone else they would have said no because they think Susan is too young. How does who she is marrying affect what age Susan is? She is still a child. Susan is very disappointed in her wedding. She has a borrowed wedding dress and shoes that don't fit, and LeBaron is late to the ceremony and leaves straight afterwards for a religious meeting that goes on all night. Susan knows LeBaron and Joel, the prophet, are arguing with Ervil over her and the fact Ervil wishes to bring blood atonement into their church. But Susan brushes it all aside, like a teenager listening to politics. Then Susan's hellish honeymoon starts. Right from the get-go, LeBaron is controlling, using Susan's money from her parents to pick out her new shoes and keeping her change. I really felt reading this scene that Susan had simply gone from her parents' control to her husband's control. And then LeBaron starts raping Susan nightly. Susan knows virtually nothing about sex and feels hurt and disgusted and can't put together in her head the man who is attentive and kind before their wedding and this person who hurts her by night and makes her cry. Susan is very stoic though, and believes she can bear anything and make a life with Verlin. But who is she really kidding? She has no choice. She is caught in this polygamist web. Verlin is also very aware of what he and Susan look like to the outside world. He pretends he is her father when they are on their honeymoon, and I am even more disgusted by Verlin knowing this fact. Susan, though, sheltered as she is, doesn't understand Verlin's lack of public affection and is hurt by his coldness. While reading this book, I was struck immediately by one huge similarity in the story that every other polygamy story I've ever heard has, and that is the sense of community the women try to build with each other. Susan especially misses her sisters and mothers, and she struggles with many of her sister wives. There is always a sense of the women persevering together and holding each other's hand to get through things. But with polygamy there is always some jealousy and bitchiness. But most of the women try to be kind to each other, understanding each other's pain. When Susan and Verlin arrive at his home, she is immediately struck by how poor Verlin's massive family is. There is no meat to eat and no inside plumbing. Susan is given a small trailer to live in, which is full of drafts and hasn't been lived in years. After his first night back, Verlin leaves to go back to work, and Susan knows she will not see him for at least 2 weeks. Susan is also very aware that out of the 3 sister wives she lives with, only Lucy, Verlin's 3rd wife, likes her. His first wife, Charlotte, is very cold, and Beverly, his 4th wife, won't even talk to her. The part I felt most sick about was when I discovered Verlin's 2 oldest daughters, Donna and Rhea, are only a year younger than Susan. It makes Susan very uncomfortable to think about. So imagine how Donna and Rhea must have felt knowing what their dad was doing to their school friend. Susan is also trying to come to terms with her own jealousy of her sister wives. On her first full day back at her new home, she has to wait outside Charlotte's bedroom while Charlotte and Verlin have sex. And inside her own head she is screaming with jealousy, but thinks herself dirty and wrong for her own natural emotion. After a month at her new home, Susan makes some friends. One of Ervil's wives, Susan's cousin, moves up the road, and one of her friends, Lily, comes to visit, making things easier for Susan, but she still feels her lack of money keenly, especially when they go to the cinema and Lily has to pay Susan's way. Susan may now have some friends, but she is still no closer to any of Verlin's wives. Beverly and Charlotte remain distant and cold. Lucy is nice, but Susan and her have nothing in common but housework. Then Susan becomes pregnant and is riddled with morning sickness, but she is very happy about the baby and can't wait to tell Verlin. But the night she plans to tell him, she catches her husband cuddling up to her friend Lily and discovers through gossip that Verlin and Lily have been courting for months and nobody bothered to tell her. Susan is so jealous and angry it makes her physically sick, and she yells at Verlin, trying to remind him they have only been married 4 months, and out of those 4 months he has only spent 7 nights alone with her. She is also angered to discover that Verlin got her and Beverly the same Christmas gift. Due to Susan's upset, Verlin agrees to let her visit her mother for 2 weeks in colonial LeBaron. But when she discovers the fact, Ervil is stealing cars and plans to take care of Verlin if he causes any more problems, she decides to leave colonial LeBaron early. Susan's bus trip home is hellish, especially at customs. I have gone through similar things, being a young woman traveling alone, so I really felt for Susan in this chapter. When she arrives back home, Verlin worries about Susan's happiness because he showed no excitement when she finally told him she was pregnant, so he decides to move her to Los Molinos, another LeBaron colony, close to her aunt and uncle, and 2 of his other wives. One of these wives is his second wife, Irene, who Susan likes, and for a while she is happier. Money is still an issue though. Verlin gives her $3, but it is nowhere near enough to cover the maternity clothes Susan now needs, and her resentment only grows when she discovers Verlin and Joel give Ervil money. Susan is also very angry Verlin won't have sex with her while she is pregnant for religious reasons, and is really jealous of the elusive, black-eyed, snobby witch Esther, Verlin's fifth wife. This is the end of the first part of this review. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel so you will not miss the second part, which will be coming out next week. You can also follow me on Instagram at Lady Jessica Riddell. Remember, until next time, keep sweet.